We're back with another episode of the Goonery. Been a couple of weeks, but we're here and we're going to be talking a little bit of wrestling, a little bit of football, but we're going to start out with the NBA playoffs and the disaster that the Brooklyn Nets pretty much wore all year, I guess we could say.
I mean, you want to talk about just a failure on all fronts. With they come into the season with their big three with Kyrie, James Harden, and KD. Kyrie doesn't get vaccinated. Harden comes into camp overweight again, and KD seems to be the only guy that has a speck of consistency, and that's not even saying much too, considering he missed games with an injury. And when it was all said and done, they were a playing team. And it's not like they were a playing team because like they gelled the whole season and they just couldn't get the job done. There was a lot going on there that made them a playing team. And then, taking on the Boston Celtics, a team that is arguably been the hottest team in basketball going into playoffs, that was a really, really, really hard get for the Brooklyn Nets. But you know what? There's a lot of blame to go around. You got Kyrie not getting vaccinated, and you have the trade for James Harden, Ben Simmons, who to me, I don't want to be that guy to question I don't want to be the guy to question the validity of an injury. That's unfair and that's extremely irresponsible.
Mm-hmm.
But you have to wonder with all the clips you see of him practicing and actually moving around and back injuries are nothing to deal with. Back injuries are something that you could barely even move. So if that's going on and you're saying you can't play because my back is hurting me, my mental is not quite there, what's the real reason? Is it that you're not mentally ready to play basketball, or are you trying to fleece the Nets because you want to get out your initial situation, but you get yourself into a situation that is way better for you, and you still decide you're not going to play? He could be blamed, but where I ultimately lay the blame, the Nets organization as a whole. Kenny Atkinson was the right guy to coach the Brooklyn Nets.
Mm-hmm.
They had no business sticking with the Philadelphia 76ers that one year. And they were an ascending team, and we all thought if they get a piece or two, let me tell you something, this team's going to be dangerous. And that's exactly what they were. They fired him, and they bring in a first-timer like Steve Nash. And basically, the whole basketball world was told by KD and Kyrie, we don't need no government. We can govern ourselves. And look where it got them. And we saw with just the inexperience, with the lack of, adjustments and lapses on defense and stuff like that, it was just a disaster. And all signs point towards Steve Nash staying. So if Steve Nash is staying, they have to overload this team again or break it up. It's really no in between because you have to win with KD and Kyrie on your team.
So I look at it for the Nets in the next year. You're going to have a starting five, most likely consisting of Kyrie Irving, Kevin Durant, Ben Simmons, Andre Drummond, and then fill in the blank with your fifth guy, probably Seth Curry. If you don't win a championship with that team, you have to consider it a failure. Honestly, you have to consider it a failure. You have to consider it a failure this year. And I don't know if you saw the quote from Kyrie saying that it was something along the lines, I'm paraphrasing here, but he said, I now realize that there was too much attention on me this season for my off the court issues. Yeah, no shit, dude. No shit. And he was like, I didn't want to be a distraction. I don't want to dump on Kyrie Irving, but he's a guy who just thrives off of drama. I feel like everybody knows that guy, and it's Kyrie Irving. And I think it's going to show the last few years with Kyrie with the Nets this year and then Kyrie with the Celtics last year. Is he ever going to be able to get it done without LeBron?
And that's a big storyline to follow because he was speaking glowingly about KD, saying that he actually has somebody he could trust with the last shot. But Kyrie's rhetoric is so strange to me because it just shows a massive massive lack of self-awareness. You go from saying, and after game 3, oh, we didn't gel all season, to saying maybe it was me, that I was a distraction. Oh, really? You just figured that out? It took for you to get eliminated from the playoffs to find that out? Obviously, dude. Like, come on. I like Kyrie Irving. I don't think he's a bad guy. I don't think
Oh,
anything that he does is in bad faith. But he needs to realize that, like, the causes he stands up for is great. I respect it, and I respect the aspect of him knowing that there are things that are bigger than basketball. So if he feels as though he needs to step away because he needs to clear his mind because of these causes, I am all for it, because there's not a lot of players that would do that. There's a lot of players that would say, I'm with the cause, but they don't actually take action for the cause. Kyrie's one of those guys, whether it be to a fault or not. He's one of those guys, and I commend him for that. But at the same time, find the balance between doing that and being a basketball player is what he's struggling with, and it's ultimately going to cost his team from a chemistry standpoint and from a gelling standpoint.
yeah.
Granted, same thing, but it could be on the court or off the court that it's affecting.
Yeah, and I just don't understand how, with the mandate in New York this year, that the Nets ever thought they would have a chance to make a deep run like that. And I don't want to say that the Nets should have traded Kyrie Irving, because I mean, I find it very hard to trade a player as talented as Kyrie Irving unless you're getting an absolute organizational changing player coming back in return. But correct me if I'm wrong, the mandate is lifted for next year, right?
Correct.
Okay, so he's staying put. He's staying put, and it's going to be really interesting to see what happens, because I really think if they have the outside scores that they do in Kyrie, Kevin Durant, and Seth Curry, I think Ben Simmons could be dominant if he suits up. But if he's gonna suit up is the question in the storyline you have to follow, because that is as perfect of a situation for Ben Simmons as you can imagine.
And think about this. Ben Simmons hasn't even touched the floor. He's already souring with the Nets. You think KD is having that for a full season? You think if Ben Simmons is not guaranteed to be on the court at the start of opening game in October, I don't see him being on the Nets to
I
start
don't
the season.
I don't know if I see him in the NBA. As bad as that sounds, who's going to want him at this point? Yes, he's a talented player, but he's become a bigger circus than Kyrie Irving.
And here's the thing. I'm not saying Ben Simmons is a bad player, but his skill set does not demand the stuff that he puts the teams through.
Nope.
He's good, but he is not that good. He has a game that's lacking, that aggression that's lacking, and that was the reason why Philly didn't want him. The fans didn't want him, and you just have to question whether he is going to be down for for the team, regardless of how Philly treated him on his way out. That was also multiplied by the fact that you show up to camp while telling Philadelphia you didn't want to be there. Like, you gotta pick a side, You gotta pick a side, because now you look like the pariah, and
Yep.
all that could have been avoided. But that's him. And I don't, and personally, I don't get it. If this was other superstars, I'd be like, I don't necessarily agree, but I get it. Him, no, I don't.
Yeah, and you really wonder, like, did he even want to be in New York? Did he want to be on the Nets? Because he wasn't on the bench for the elimination game last night. He wasn't there, and he was supposedly supposed to play last night. And then out of nowhere, he was a late game scratch, and nowhere to be found. I'm not saying he should have played. If you like, jumping in at that point in the season for your first game is a disaster waiting to happen. I mean, it's going to blow up in your face if you expect anyone on the court to have chemistry. I don't care how talented you are. I'm really, really interested to see the directions the Nets take it, because with the way they're running their organization, hell, I wouldn't be surprised if they go out and get Harden, bring Harden back to New York.
That bridge is as long as KD's there, Harden will never go back. That bridge is burned. Kyrie as well.
It's just like they're just so poorly run at this point. It feels like that. I wouldn't be surprised. It makes no sense, but I wouldn't be surprised, as dumb as it sounds.
And this is the thing, because we saw this with the Lakers this season with LeBron and his decision making, which ultimately was the downfall of the Lakers. We need to have a discussion about how these players may not be the best GMs.
Yeah,
Like, I understand the star power is going to rule over everything because they are the product and they're the ones who bring the money and they're the ones who bring in the wins. But at the same time, there needs to be a balance. It doesn't seem to be a balance because there's no reason why Steve Nash should have got hired as the head coach when it was so many other guys out there you could have had.
Yeah.
And honestly, this issue probably wouldn't even happen if Steve Nash wasn't the head coach. So that's a discussion to be had down the road.
I know, and I saw the quote come out today that Kyrie is ecstatic or excited or whatever it is to regain his position with KD and the general manager to start building a championship winning team. Don't you think they had a championship winning team this year? I don't know what else you're going to build towards, if we're being completely honest.
And truth be told, they didn't have a championship winning team, right? The fact that yeah, that the Harden trade really threw a snag into, especially with Ben Simmons that you didn't know was going to play. So in that regard, no. If they had Ben Simmons on the team, possibly, but we'll see.
Yeah, it's and with as wide, I would say the East is wide open this year. I would say. I mean, the Heat are probably the most disrespected 1 seed of all time, and I think the Celtics end up coming out of the East at this point just because, I mean, they're defensive juggernaut. Jason Tatum's playing at unreal levels. Jaylen Brown's playing well. If the Nets were going to do it, it would be this year, I think, because these teams are only going to keep getting stronger. And the Bulls are going to probably make a big splash this offseason, I would assume. And I could see them trading Vucevic, getting him out of there, and then having a third running mate alongside DeRozan and Levine, bringing and having Lonzo Ball back. There's a lot of moving pieces in the East, and obviously you still have Giannis in Milwaukee. I don't know. I don't know. These playoffs have been entertaining so far, though. I'll say that they've been an entertaining playoffs so far.
100%. And I tell you, if the Celtics come out the East, they better consider themselves lucky. Why? And no pun intended. But if you want to know why, the boogeyman ain't playing for Milwaukee in that series. And that boogeyman I'm talking about is Chris Middleton. And Boston fans will tell you they hate that man because every time Middleton cooks them. So if the Celtics get past the Bucks, then yeah, that's going to be the reason why.
And I didn't even mention the 76ers either. Obviously, they're Doc Riversing themselves, but it's I don't know what else Joel Embiid can do at this point, if we're being honest. I really don't know how much better he can play and what else he can do. And he's a guy who needs to change his scenery, if you ask me. I don't see it ever working out in Philadelphia. Obviously, he is the Philadelphia 76ers at this point. I mean, he was exactly what the process was supposed to be, but I just don't see them ever getting it done there.
It's going to hurt, and it's crazy to say, but the day that Joel Embiid departs from the 76ers, because I think it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. It's going to hurt on the same level as Iverson leaving. And we know Allen Iverson was an icon in Philadelphia, but Joel Embiid, like you said, he's been there through everything. Process, the come up, you name it. He's been there through everything. So let's just say, hypothetically, the Sixers blow this lead, they lose. You're going to Embiid's probably going to request a trade. He's well within his right to do that.
I hate how NBA players have as much power as they do, as bad as it sounds. I hate that they can request a trade like that and they will be traded. And I'm just not a fan of it because I feel like these guys are just playing 2K at this point and playing like they're a GM. I get it. These guys want to do what's best for them. End of the day, it's understandable. I don't know where he would go at this point either. Like, where does Joel Embiid, if he's traded, who's going to take him? I mean, he's got that contract. Obviously, he's an MVP. Like, Joel Embiid is about as good as it gets. But is LeBron somehow going to bring him out to LA? Is he going to go? I don't know. I honestly have no idea.
Well, it's funny you asked that because you said that they should trade Vucevic. If that happens, it makes perfect sense.
I would be over the moon. Don't get me wrong. But there's another center who plays in the Western Conference who I think will be wearing red, white, and black in about 2 years, and his name is Nikola Jokic. Bringing him and Arturas Karnisovas reuniting, scouted him out of Europe, second round pick, found him dying in the rough. I mean, either way, I would not be upset.
You know, I absolutely thought you was going to say Anthony Davis, but who knows? He might be on a bargain deal at that point of his career.
Anthony Davis, I can't stand him. One, he's from Chicago, so I should like him, but he's a Packer fan, so he can go fuck himself. But like, what happened to him? What happened to Anthony Davis?
Anthony Davis is, I'm probably, this is probably 1A, 1B with James Harden, but the most frustrating superstar in the NBA. You look, every game he plays, he's on the ground, hurt, grabbing something. And you know, if his ass stays off the ground, he is a player that can win MVP or be in the running for MVP every single season.
There is no reason he shouldn't be every year.
Like, it's crazy to me, and this is not what I signed up for. I granted we won a championship, bubble championship. We won a championship with them, but what else has been there for him? Not much. And it's not like when he's on the floor, he's not a good player. He's an excellent player, but damn, he just can't stay off the floor. Mm-hmm. But before we switch topics, I do want to address something in terms of NBA Twitter. And I saw a lot of takes over the weekend saying KD and Kyrie, these are the most skilled players in the league and they can't get out the first round with a win. Listen, please listen to me. Just because the team don't win, don't mean the individual didn't do its part. I'm not saying this is completely like, this is for the series, because the series, that wasn't their best work. So, okay, it happens. It is what it is. But if you go off the body of work with them, y'all can't, like, there's no one that could sit here and tell me that KD and Kyrie aren't some of the most talented players anybody has ever seen.
Yeah.
So my main point with this is stop with the revisionist bullshit that y'all love to do. Y'all love to prematurely coordinate people, and as prematurely as y'all do that, y'all just as much bring down a player because they didn't do something that y'all liked. And this is NBA Twitter in a nutshell, because why do you think KD has so many haters? Because he's always compared to LeBron. It was the same thing with LeBron and Kobe and LeBron and Jordan. It's the same thing all around. I'm going to let you on a secret. You can like multiple players in the league without comparing them. It's okay. It's okay to appreciate plays without comparing them. Because once you compare them, because you're going to end up saying, oh, this person does something lesser than the other person, so that person must stink. Like, it's amazing how NBA Twitter works. And that's why I try to stay away. I watch basketball in silence and I don't get involved. And that's why. That
is the extent that you sum that up perfectly, because I cannot stand the NBA Twitter. I mean, it's how many 15-year-olds with Ja Morant and fucking who Trey Young profile pictures don't you want to deal with on a daily basis, and trying to constantly ratio you over your take when you say that Kevin Durant is the most skilled big 7-footer of all time. Like it's just like it's obnoxious. It's fucking obnoxious. And people on NBA Twitter, I would love to see their screen time on Twitter on their iPhones at the end of the week, every single week, because I guarantee you it's at least double what mine is. At a minimum. At a minimum.
You know what? Not for nothing. For all those people that have LeBron parody accounts, KD, any professional athlete, where are y'all fathers at? You think your father gonna be happy with you doing this? Imitating another grown man? Like, I don't know, man. I don't know. They anger me. But I had to get it off my chest because NBA Twitter is a cesspool, and I wouldn't recommend it to anybody.
Yeah, that's I think that's a good point to move on to our next topic, and something that's either going to make us really, really happy or really, really pissed off. And it is Ryan Poles' first draft as the GM of the Chicago Bears. No first round picks, but they have 2 second-round picks, 39 and 48. The 48 pick was from the Khalil Mack trade. And they picked in the 3rd, 2 in the 5th, 1 in the 6th. Poles has been like pretty vocal about wanting to get mean and nasty up front. I mean, I feel like the offensive lineman he's been describing at the end of the day has been someone like Olin Cruz, is what he envisions as being that ideal offensive lineman. I think that in this draft, there's going to be 3 positions taken, and that is it. I think we're going to see wide receiver for the Bears. I think we're going to see offensive tackles who can probably kick in the guard, and you're going to see some sort of defensive back, whether it's corner or safety. And I just hope they don't do something stupid. And by stupid, I mean trading up into the first round and losing draft capital to try and get on whatever receiver ends up falling, because this is an incredibly deep draft at wide receiver.
So I follow this one guy on Twitter. I think it's the Bears blog. I think it is Jeff Hughes.
Mm-hmm.
He got a text saying that the same talent that's going to be taken at 5 is going to be taken at 55. So what that says is that literally you do not have to overthink anything in this draft. That's how deep this class is, by the way. If that text being sent.
No, yeah, absolutely. And so I think there's the misconception about this draft this year is because it's a weak quarterback class, that it's a weak class overall, and that is not the case. That is not the case.
Not at all, because you look at the wide receivers that can be taken in the 2nd round easily. If it wasn't a deep defensive draft, wide receivers would be of a plenty in the 1st round.
And I bet there's still going to be 5+ receivers taken in the 1st round.
Exactly. So, and that's not even counting John Mechie, George Pickens, Jalen Tolbert, Sky Moore. And potentially Jahan Dotson could fall out the 1st round. Lord, please, by the way.
And do you want to know someone who's a little lower on boards that I really, really fucking like? It's David Bell out of Purdue.
Listen, I've been seeing a lot of mock drafts. He could go in the 3rd round.
Which is
imagine getting that value in the 3rd round.
Absurd if David. I mean, he is, in my lifetime of what I remember, I mean, this might be a dumb take, but the best player I have ever seen play at Purdue.
Oh, yeah. By far. I don't think it's very close either. Other than Rondell Moore.
Rondell Moore was great. But, I mean, he was electric. And how many players can you say were electric at Purdue as a wide receiver? Like, this past year, played 11 games, 93 catches, 1,286 yards, 6 touchdowns, and he averaged about 14 yards per catch. That's unheard of at Purdue.
If you want to look back at game tape, look at the game tape against Michigan State.
Yes.
You could not put a cornerback that could guard him in that game. And somehow, and this happens every year, there will be these scouts and even fans that overthink it and say, he's got this wrong with him, that wrong with him. Let me tell you something. If y'all liked Allen Robinson, he's the closest thing you're gonna get to Allen Robinson in the draft. And granted,
Yeah.
that may not be popular with a lot of people because Allen Robinson fell out of favor with a lot of people in Chicago.
How good Allen Robinson was as far as
Exactly. Listen, Mitch Trubisky does not have any type of success if Allen Robinson wasn't his number one receiver. So let's get that clear.
Yeah.
So let's just say we go offensive tackle, defensive back, or edge rusher for both picks in the second round. You get David Bell in the third round. Is anybody complaining about not getting a wide receiver in the second round? I don't think so.
If they are, I will tell them to go kick rocks because it's just value. Out of value alone. David Bell, up until about 2 months ago, was a fringe first-round pick. And
yes,
I don't know what happened. I don't know what his combine numbers look like, but if he fell that far because of the combine, I'll take game tape over combine measurables 10 out of 10 times. And I don't
100%.
Like, who's the guy from Georgia right now? The edge
George
rusher.
Pickens.
Yeah.
Walker. I forgot his first name.
Yeah. He was not even close to being the best defender on that Georgia defense this year. Now, just because of how good his combine numbers are, they're saying that he might be the first overall pick and he shot up draft boards. I never want a guy like that, but you want to know who's going to end up on? He's definitely going to be a Jacksonville Jaguar, I bet.
Probably, and this is the issue with a lot of these teams. Granted, I'm gonna preface this by saying there's a lot of bias coming from me, but also a speck of truth. There's not a lot of guys that's better than Aiden Hutchinson in the draft. Why? I don't understand.
He's not.
Why is it?
He's like 6'8" and like 270 or whatever. We're close to that.
He is athletically on par with the Bosa brothers.
Yeah,
and we remember how good they were in college. You gonna tell me that he does not measure up to those guys? You don't pick him number one. You are overthinking it. I will, and that's not the, demean anybody else that's rumored to be number one pick. Aiden Hutchinson should be the number one pick.
Yeah.
And if they overthink this, if the Lions overthink this, I don't know. I
really don't think they overthink it. I mean, well, the Lions picked 2, correct?
They pick. Did he pick 2? They probably do pick 2. Yeah, it's the Jaguars number 1. Yeah. Okay.
So,
yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know if you've seen this, but I've been seeing some smoke online that the Lions might be taking Malik Willis at number 2. And I don't think that Jared Goff is the long-term answer at quarterback by any stretch of the imagination in Detroit. But do you really put the second overall pick on Malik Willis? Because no, I don't think so at all. But that team was frisky last year, I guess you could say. I mean, they were in the majority of the games they played, and they had absolutely zero pass rush. And Dan Campbell doesn't strike me as the type of guy who wants to spend the second overall pick on a quarterback who's going to need to develop for a few years when he knows he can get an impact player right out of the gate.
Which is funny you mentioned that, because they can have both.
I know.
They can get Walker, they can get Hutchinson. You wait to the second round, Sam Howell is waiting right into your lap.
Sam Howell is going to make a team so incredibly happy. He's going to be the best quarterback in this draft, I think. I still stand by that. I've been standing by that since I saw him play in a bowl game his freshman year against Wake Forest. And I thought that he was going to be a first overall pick at one point, despite his size. He's Baker Mayfield with a better arm.
Yes.
He is Baker Mayfield with a better arm. And it's honestly probably more accurate than Baker Mayfield, but people just brushed this past year for him under the rug because he lost, I think it was 8 offensive starters. So it was him. Yeah. It was him and 2 other returning guys. I don't care how good you are. You're not going to be successful. And I think that he is going to end up somewhere in the second round, early second round. I could see him sliding into the back end of the first as well, with the team trading back up and into the first to come and get him. I could see him falling into that category. I saw someone link him to the Seahawks as well.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to say he plays a similar way to Russell Wilson because that's unfair to Russell Wilson,
Yeah.
but Sam Howell moves better than people think. He's a fairly accurate quarterback, and I think he's got a great deep ball. Granted, I'm not ever going to be paid to evaluate NFL talent, but I would be a lot more excited if my team ended up with Sam Howell than a Kenny Pickett.
Listen, I probably will not agree with you there because I think Kenny Pickett is somebody I see a lot of Alex Smith in him personally.
I know I see that as well. Like I think that's a great comparison, but he's almost 25, I'm pretty sure.
Right.
With a quarterback with not that high of a ceiling, I don't want to say it reminds me of Brandon Weeden, but Brandon Weeden was 26 when he got drafted, I believe.
Yeah.
He was a first-round pick, and I think Kenny Pickett has a higher ceiling than Brandon Weeden, but I don't know. I just wouldn't be excited as a fan if Kenny Pickett was my first-round pick and future quarterback.
It really depends on the situation because you can plug him in a team like Pittsburgh and you'll be like, okay, if he don't make mistakes, then we will be okay. And possibly the Steelers may not be looking for that, considering that Big Ben was that type of quarterback on his last legs, trying not to make mistakes, but also wasn't like trying to push the ball down the field and trying to really like make some noise. So do they go that same route? Possibly. I do think that considering I believe I don't know if he's a 4-year starter, but I know he's been playing for a good while. Yeah. So a guy like that going into such a veteran-driven locker room, I think that would be the perfect situation for Kenny Pickett.
No, it wouldn't. Wouldn't even have to move. He probably wouldn't leave his college apartment.
Yeah, exactly. And then you got Malik Willis. I see him being a Panther. I see him being a Panther. I think it would be I think it would be a great situation for him, even though, like, I know people probably scoffed at the idea of Ben McAdoo being an offensive coordinator for the Panthers, but
offensive coordinator
much better.
The head coach.
He was much better as a coordinator. So that's a good situation for him. In terms of the rest of the guys, you got Matt Corral. We still don't know. Could be a commander. Desmond Ridder, people are very high on him. Personally, I don't see it.
I like that. I've watched a lot of Cincinnati games, and I don't think he does anything particularly crazy good, but he does not do anything bad, in my opinion, and he's more accurate than people give him credit for. And I think a lot of the reason he played poorly against Alabama, I mean, that offensive line, an AAC offensive line is going to get dominated by an SEC offensive line 10 times out of 10. You know what I mean?
Which is really just
that's why I don't want to knock him for that performance as much as others do.
Yeah.
But he played really fucking well against Notre Dame.
Exactly. And you know what? I'm glad you brought that up because that Notre Dame game really does stick out to me because
he won by 2 scores on the road.
Hostile environment. Not a lot of teams going to South Bend and win.
No.
So the fact he went up there and won that game, and while he played particularly well, like that makes me think. But it's at this point with Ridder and Corral, it's like a matter of who's going to Washington, who's going to New Orleans. I can't see Jameis being the guy for New Orleans long term. But if that being said, I also don't know if they will reach for a quarterback in the first round either.
And especially with the first-year head coach, too, is why I'm hesitant to see I mean, obviously, he's been there in New Orleans as defensive coordinator, so it's not that new, I guess you could say. But I still think they have faith in Jameis. I still have faith in Jameis, and I hate to admit that. And we still haven't seen a full year of LASIK Jameis since he's had LASIK surgery on his eyes. And he played, I would say, pretty well before tearing ACL last year. So I think he's at least got another year or two before to really prove himself. And if it's not at that point, we'll see. But I mean, Matt Corral in New Orleans makes sense. down south, right by Ole Miss, just geographic regions, you could say. But then I think he would work really well with Kamara.
Yeah.
And if they get Slant Boy back too, I mean, they have options down there. And the Saints will never be bad for long, in my opinion. I mean,
I agree.
There's one of those franchises, at least in the last like 15 or so years, I could say that every year, every week they go in any game, you're like, oh, it's the Saints. Yeah, they can win this one. I've always felt that way about the Saints since I remember watching football, at least. Or since Drew Brees has gotten there, I could say.
Yeah.
He's gone now. But yeah. So if pivoting back to the Bears, because that's obviously what main thing we wanted to talk about here. If you had one dream player at 39 for the Bears, who is that?
Jahan Dotson, without question. And I was going to go Treylon Burks because he could be a candidate to drop too.
Mm-hmm.
But Jahan Dotson, his route running is just a thing of beauty. And honestly, I think with a lot of people have been really critical of Foles of how he handled the wide receiver position.
Mm-hmm.
But truth be told, there wasn't that many like can't miss weapons out there in free agency for him.
No, I mean, I know I didn't want them to go out and sign Juju.
Or Sammy Watkins.
Sammy Watkins, real quick, talk about a guy who everyone thought was going to be a stud in the NFL and has just been so incredibly average his entire career.
Yeah, I mean,
and
yeah,
I think it's been amplified the last few days too with Byron Pringle getting arrested. But
yeah,
I mean, I didn't hate the way he navigated it this offseason at all.
No, not at all.
And I think people fail to forget, everyone was really excited for Poles after his introductory press conference when he said, we're going to build this team through the draft. People got excited about that, and then the panties got all in a bunch, and he didn't sign every free agent. You can never make Chicago fans happy. That is what I will say, and I get it. Half of Chicago has a horrible owner with Jerry Reinsdorf owning their baseball team like me, and you never sign premier free agents. You just always set yourself up for disappointment. The Bulls hardly do shit in free agency, and when they do, they sign guys way past their prime who should have been in Chicago 10 years prior. And the Bears, they don't. I mean, yeah, they've made some great moves in the offseasons past decade, I guess you could say, whether it's been, Khalil Mack, the trade, Julius Peppers. But it's always been for defensive guys, aside from Allen Robinson, but he was coming off a torn ACL. You just set yourself up for disappointment in Chicago, so you just never let yourself have expectations. That is what I've come to learn, and yet I still get upset. But the people who give themselves expectations, I don't know what you like. I don't know what you expect. And when Poles literally says it to your face, I am not going to build this team through free agency, at least for a few years. What do you expect him to do? You think he's going to lie to the media? And you'd be pissed at him if he did the exact opposite.
Exactly. But the main point that people are forgetting, we're broke.
Yeah.
We're broke. This was the issue with Ryan Pace. Yeah, I hated when he went out and overpaid for guys that didn't deserve the money that they got. Literally, Poles is saying, the hell with all that. I want to make sure we have as much money as possible for the next season. I understand people want their football team to compete and contend every single season. I'm that guy, but it has to make sense. The more I get older, the more I realize it's not worth it to spill in free agency if you know you don't have a team that's ready to compete. It doesn't work that way. So now this draft is very important. Don't get it twisted. This is an extremely important draft, but at least we have a sense of the direction of this team is of what they want. Like, it's very, very clear now. So if you don't get that, maybe we have a right to be upset. But if we get George Pickens and Jahan Dotson is on the board, they're gonna be like, oh, why'd you get this guy? Honestly, both them great players, both do one thing very, very well, but they're still good players. That should be the end game of all this. Get the right players. That's it. I don't give a damn if they get one of the top receivers on the board. It may be because I'm a George Pickens guy, and he'd probably be the best guy to get at that position. But am I going to be upset if we get a Christian Watson or Sky Moore? No, they all good players, and that should be the goal.
That's as good as I could have put it. Is get good players, and if you're unhappy, I don't know what else you want. Because at the end of the day, you just need good football players in every place on the field. And if you're going to draft them, who gives a fuck where they come from? And if it's not the guy you wanted, you're not the guy getting paid. And if the people who are getting paid think they're a better option, guess what? I'm most likely going to lean with them and side with them in that discussion.
Exactly.
So we'll see how the Bears either make us jump for joy or cry our eyes out within the next couple of days. But moving on to some wrestling talk, how we've been wrapping up the show a lot lately. So Brandon and I, we are wrestling fans, but we are not someone who's going to ride the dicks of AEW like a lot of Twitter. I think it's a good product. I don't have a problem with it. I will never understand how AEW fans think that WWE fans care about them as much as they vice versa. But there was a quote this week from a Bleacher Report article where The Undertaker did an out-of-character interview and was asked what his thoughts were on Kenny Omega, and he replied with, "Who?" When I tell you I laughed out loud at 8 a.m. when I read that, it was the funniest quote I've seen in a while. We had talked about it, Brandon. I want to believe it's a real quote. I don't know if it's possible, but I think it's, like you said, funnier to believe Undertaker lives in that much of a bubble that he has no idea who Kenny Omega is.
It is so easy to believe that he is WWE to its absolute core. If you don't believe me, go back in 2001 and you look at the power trip that he was on when the invasion angle happened. He ain't put nobody on this. So that's how you know. So, but let's just say, if this is a real quote, we had a discussion not too long ago about why being a WWE superstar is more eye-popping than being a professional wrestler. Mm-hmm. Kenny Omega, you can say, is one of the best professional wrestlers in the world.
Absolutely. I don't think it's up for a debate either.
Exactly. But he ain't no entertainer. He's no WWE superstar. He's not a sports entertainer. That's the biggest point out of this, because here's the problem with pro wrestling purists, real wrestling fans, as they like to call themselves. You would like the things that they do in between the ropes, and that's totally fine. I would be lying if I said I don't give a damn about what someone does between the ropes. I like good high flying moves. I like creative stuff. But if you can't sell what you can do in the ring with another guy, why am I supposed to care?
Yeah.
I'm gonna give you a perfect example. Ricochet is one of the most talented wrestlers I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah.
But he is the most cheesiest, corniest dude, and that's exactly why. That's precise reason why when he was in the contention for the world title at one point, they dropped his ass because they realized he's good, but he's not someone who's gonna move you with the things that he says. You gotta understand something. You want to talk about the guys that are real needle movers in the WWE in terms of history: Stone Cold Steve Austin, The Rock, Chris Jericho, Triple H. All four of those guys know what they have in common. They all can sell a fight. That is the most important thing. And truth be told,
ooze charisma. I think that's the biggest thing. The biggest thing is having an ounce of charisma, and Ricochet has as much charisma as hair on his fucking head.
Yeah. And truth be told, around the time when Kenny Omega was the AEW champion, I was watching AEW a lot.
Mhm.
And truth be told, you can point me to a memorable promo of his. You can't point me to anything he did. The most exciting thing he did was turn heel.
Yeah.
Outside of that, it was like, okay, he's a good wrestler. He puts on good matches. That's cool.
Yeah.
And that's why, like, I call him overrated. When I call him overrated, I don't mean it in a negative way. I mean it as he's good, but he's not somebody I'm not rushing to the TV to watch because he doesn't know how. Like, he tells stories within his wrestling matches, but if I were to go look at what led up to the matches, there's nothing there.
Yeah.
Not there's nothing there for me. So that's why I don't like telling people that he's overrated because, like, I feel like I would get jumped and I'll get thrown in a dumpster. But I think he's somebody that can wrestle his ass off, but he's not my type of wrestler.
Yeah. And there are 4 AEW world champions at this point, and in my opinion, Kenny Omega has been by far the most boring. And I really don't think that's up for a debate. I mean, I know people will say, but the matches. I thought Jericho's reign was entertaining. I mean, Jericho was the perfect first champion for AEW. There's no ifs, ands, or ors about it. I thought that was, I mean, it was too soon for Hangman Adam Page. Moxley had a, I would say, pretty entertaining reign. And then from what I've been watching, Hangman's reign so far is, I think it's been fucking awesome. And just, I just think the long term storytelling to get him there was incredible. Losing to Jericho way back in, what was that? Probably 2019,
18.
2018 or 19, whatever it was. And then just falling, getting kicked out of the elite, and then joining the Dark Order, become the new leader of the Dark Order. I just think it was a really great storyline. And I think the next world champ is probably going to be MJF. I don't know. I would, if I had to guess, maybe MJF, or I mean, now they're looking like it's going to be CM Punk and Hangman Adam Page feud, and I think they'd be foolish to put the belt on CM Punk if we're being completely honest at this point. But do you want to know what's crazy though? You look at that. I would say 3 of the 4 of their champions fit the WWE mold more than the AEW mold, because Hangman Adam Page was rumored to go to WWE for years, more than any of the elite guys when he was still wrestling in Japan and Ring of Honor.
You know, I I I like Adam Page a lot. I really do. But his title reign has been just okay to me. And like and this is no bias because like this coming from a fan of his. It's been okay. But I'm not gonna lie to you. I think Punk becomes the champion. I don't think it's a long run.
Yeah, it's definitely a transitional run, I would say. And I don't know if it's going to be with someone like MJF. It's going to be Wardlow, however you fucking say his name. Ricky Starks, potentially. I mean, there's AEW has, like they do have star power. I don't think he drops to Bryan Danielson, though. I really don't.
No.
Do I know who I would fucking love to see him drop it to? I don't know if you're a fan of him or not. Eddie Kingston, man. I would love to just see him get one run with a world title.
So as much as I like Eddie Kingston, me personally, I can't see him being world champion. To me, he fits the mold of a guy who just likes to beat people's asses. I think if he's like that for the rest of his AEW career, I'm totally okay with that. But world champion, I'm not very sure. I'm gonna be honest with you.
I changed my mind. Miro.
If they put him on TV,
I mean, I thought he's still hurt at this point.
like truthfully, and maybe this is because I don't watch a lot of AEW, truth be told, but what is Miro doing these days?
I'm almost positive he's still hurt at this point. But
okay, if he's hurt, then okay.
I could be wrong, but I don't know if I ever see him getting to that level with how bloated their roster is either. I mean, people like to say WWE's roster is bloated. You have Keith Lee sitting there doing absolutely nothing. And
And yeah,
I mean, he's not the only one either, but he's the one who sticks out to me because he was presented as such a big deal out of the gate. And he's been in some fairly meaningless matches to this point.
you know, we called this a lot. Like when it was happening, we called this. Overloading the roster does absolutely nothing for anybody. And the funny thing is that WWE got a lot of shit for releasing guys, but what they were really doing was shrinking the roster so that a lot of guys won't be lost in the shuffle. It all makes sense because once a guy like Keith Lee gets lost, Swerve, Ricky Starks, Powerhouse, they're gonna be like, if they went to the WWE, they may be a little bit better. Oh, really? Yeah, obviously, because you can't overload a roster and expect, you know, everybody to get a fair shake because the way AEW is constructed, they don't have pay-per-views every month. They don't have pay-per-views or special. They have specials, but they don't have like World Championship matches on there.
Yeah.
So you have to think how many opportunities are really going to come around to guys. They have to wait and wait and wait and wait. And around that time, they have meaningless matches where they're really not being elevated. So what are they really doing? And in truth be told, it's nothing.
Yeah. It's interesting, but something kind of pivoting back to WWE, something that stood out to me about Raw last night was the fact that it felt like every person who was on TV was involved in a storyline. And I think that's what made the Attitude Era and the Ruthless Aggression Era feel so special. Because there was granted, not all the segments were great last night. I didn't get to watch all of the show, but what I got to watch, you could tell that they were out there for a reason compared to what we've seen on WWE television lately. If that makes sense.
It makes perfect sense because if you want to talk about the character development for a lot of guys on the Raw side, SmackDown's been a little iffy recently. And it's funny because like SmackDown was always like the king of at one point. But Seth Rollins still important, doing his character, and it's always going to get over because he's Seth Rollins. That's like he's just that good.
Yeah.
Kevin Owens, amazing,
incredible. I laughed out loud. I laughed out loud last night when Kevin Owens got poked in the eye and he yelled.
Yeah.
It's something so small, but it makes a difference.
Yeah, he's just amazing. He's amazing at everything he does. He's getting the next inclination of Elias over, and that's not to say Elias wasn't over at one point, but he changed his whole shtick, and now he's just a regular creating wrestler on 2K22, and it's getting over.
Yeah,
Cody Rhodes is being built as a main eventer. You have the Usos, who are the top dogs at this point. Randy Orton and Riddle, they still feel like a big deal.
RK Bro is awesome, man. RK Bro is awesome.
They are so good, and one thing that has been getting talked about, but I do want to mention, Randy Orton has been very instrumental in completely elevating any tag team he has been in the ring with. He's been amazing.
Cable feels like a big deal for the first time.
Yes, him and Otis, because not for nothing. Because when Otis left the briefcase, I was like, yeah, it's over for him. It's over. But look what's happening. And then you have, let's look at the other things. Austin Theory is, while I may not be a fan of his, they're making it feel like a big deal. Good.
It looks like they're setting up a feud with John Cena. Not sure if you saw that.
I'm good.
So am I, but I don't know if you saw it. It looks like they're kind of might be building towards that for SummerSlam. That might be my guess.
Yeah, and you know what? That'd be a pretty big rub. And you know what? If they're gonna do it, good. But please, for the love of God, change his character. Change his character. His character stinks. That's probably why I'm not a fan of this.
I don't know if you saw this about Austin Theory, but someone says his face when he takes his selfies looks like a rejected Fiend mask from the assembly line.
I mean, not for nothing. There's a lot of punchable faces on the roster. He's up there.
He might be.
He's up there. I mean, yeah, him and the Miz up there, and I love the Miz, but boy, does he have a punch in the face.
Yeah.
But seeing Mustafa Ali come back and instantly being put in a title picture, love that. Ciampa, and it's funny because there was a report about wrestlers being miscasted. Ciampa being a heel is the one thing that they had to get right, and they're doing that.
Yep.
Good for them.
Yep.
Damian Priest and Edge, they're gonna do incredible stuff with this. Now Finn Balor, I know he's been on a losing streak, and personally I'm not a fan of his losing streak because I love Finn Balor. But there's a reason why he's having this losing streak. There's a reason why he lost the title. I understand that you don't want your favorites to lose, but it's all building to something at least.
I originally thought that it was going to be for a tag team feud between AJ Styles and Balor against Edge and Damian Priest. But now that it looks like Ciampa's going to be on his own, is Finn Balor going to be the third man in that stable with Edge and Priest?
It's possible.
And he goes full demon?
It's, you know what? I didn't think about that considering that I believe that he said he didn't have a proper heel run in WWE. And truthfully, I'm waiting to see it. I really am. But let's imagine whomever it is, RK Bro, the Usos, who unify the championships, seeing AJ and Finn in a tag team, it's long overdue.
And I know people are going to get upset that have AJ Styles back in a tag team after he was just trudging around with Omos for however many months that was. But look what it's done for Randy Orton and Riddle. I mean, Randy Orton is as fun as he has been in half a decade, at least.
Possibly.
Like at least maybe. And he just
I would say the PC days, because he may have been entertaining, but he was doing what Randy Orton does, and that's be a menace and just kicking the shit out of people. So yeah, that was one of my favorite versions of him.
And I don't know if you saw this either, but I saw that RK Bro is supposed to end after about 3 weeks. And
insane.
It's been over a year. Like they've been going for over a year at this point. They were still in the Thunderdome when they started.
Yeah.
And I'm just happy they didn't make that short-term decision, because that's only going to help. It's only going to help Matt Riddle in the long run. And I think Randy's at the point where he's okay putting over talent week in and week out if he has to.
Definitely. And I would have never guessed that they were going to be most overacting and on Raw right now.
Neither. Ever.
I would never guessed it.
I thought it was dumb at first. And guess what? I love it every single time they're on my TV now.
You know what? Good for them. And you know what? Raw is on a streak right now that I'm very, very happy about, because it was looking bad for some points. It really was. So good for them.
And one more thing before we wrap up. I was happy to see that it looks like they're going to have women's feuds outside of the title picture now. I mean, you have Asuka come back, interrupt Becky Lynch, and I mean, you need those secondary feuds to build up challengers so it just doesn't feel so goddamn forced every time. And it's only a matter of time till Bayley comes to SmackDown and takes that title off of Ronda Rousey or Charlotte, whoever has it at that point, because I think that's going to be a great feud where she becomes the hero again.
So there's been a lot of talk about women's wrestling recently, about how like there's not a lot of roles for the women. And if they're looking for a role, they're being put in a tag team. This stuff is so important, considering, you know, Raw has 2 feuds for women that has nothing to do with the championship.
Yeah.
All have stories behind them too. So the fact that this is a thing, it's amazing to me. And you know, we're supposed to be in the golden era of women's wrestling. And the fact that we have that on Raw, SmackDown is lagging behind, unfortunately. But I'll tell you this much: what they're doing with the women's division in WWE is more than AEW can say. That's for damn sure. They ain't doing nothing with them, and you wonder, like, what is the importance for women in AEW? Is there a possibility that some of the bigger names are going to leave to WWE? Because let me tell you something. That WWE women's division is only going to get stronger. You look at the talent at NXT right now, Toxic Attraction isn't even up yet. Cora Jade is still young as hell. You got Kaylee Ray. I think she has a new name now.
Yeah.
She's still down there. They have so much talent, and I'm not gonna guarantee that they're gonna put them to use, but they have a lot that at least on NXT they're
a lot more to work with. And
yeah, definitely.
I'm gonna be honest. Before AEW put the machine behind Britt Baker, I thought it was only a matter of time until she went to WWE. But now with Adam Cole there, who knows? Probably not. But aside from her, what stars do they have in their women's division? None.
And it's crazy because Thunder Rosa is like the indie darling of that division.
Yeah.
So, and not for nothing, if I ask the casual wrestling fan who is Thunder Rosa and do you know if she's the AEW champion, they'd be like, I don't fucking know, and that's a problem. That's a big problem. And truth be told, I like Britt Baker, but she's not that woman either.
No, not at all. You're right. And AEW is only going to commit less and less time to it moving forward, if we're being honest, in my opinion. If they keep signing every name that gets released from WWE or leaves their contract with Ring of Honor, because now you have to deal with the Ring of Honor guys. Now the Khan owns that, and who knows what's going to happen with Impact wrestlers, rest of people on the Indies, New Japan. I mean, it's just the list goes on and on and on. You can only play create mode on 2K for so long. You can only play My GM for so long, and I don't want to take anything away from AEW because the amount they've grown since they started is pretty crazy, if you ask me.
Yeah.
But it's only a matter of time until they stall out with. They don't have unlimited money. I mean, I don't think that Tony Khan's dad is going to keep giving him dollar after dollar to keep playing, I guess. I mean, I don't know.
Let me tell you, just like with WCW, it only takes one bad decision, and that money is going to keep falling and falling and falling. They're going to have to go into protect mode. But you know what? It's not even an issue because every wrestling company goes through that. But it's interesting to see how the AEW purists are going to react to that one bad happening and see if they're going to keep tuning in and not boycotting it like they did with WWE and try to look for another option. Yep. So we'll see.
Yeah, I think that's a good place to wrap up for this week's show. Hopefully next week we'll be back with joyous thoughts on the Chicago Bears draft and our baseball teams in a better position. With that being said, don't forget to like, share, subscribe to the show, and we will see you next time.